Welcome to How to Build an Archetype, the series where I shed a light on unnecessary niche things. Previously on this series, I have covered archetypes awakened from party members. Well, technically party members, including Mage from Gallica, and make them stronger by skill inheritance and synthesis skill preparation while staying within its core theme. But today, we change up the pace and talk about a follower archetype instead. Chronologically as well, the next archetype that you'll unlock is this archetype. So today, we'll talk about healer. I'd rather not spend any more time on this, so let's just jump straight to the first section of the video with the basic archetype, the healer. Before that though, I want you to entertain this thought first. What do you think of a healer? Because in many fantasy media, games, in D&D or whatnot, a quote-unquote healer is straight up a role instead of a class, unlike say, warrior or mage. When we talk about a healer, there's definitely multiple interpretations that come to mind. There's a druid healer that conjures the force of nature to heal, or a shamanistic healer that uses some tribal religion to heal. All of these interpretations are valid and fit the context of a healer. But for metaphorrefantazio, the most fitting interpretation of a healer narrows down to two classes. It's either a full-blown priest or a cleric. I mean, this makes sense because of the power of these classes. Drawing the power of God to heal is in line with the setting where the Catholic Church being the dominant power in the world. Now to pick between the two, that's where I find it difficult, because the way I see it, the healer archetype is technically both. Wielding a mace is a cleric characteristic, but being so fragile and heavily leaning on magic with almost no strength or physical capabilities is a priest characteristic. So I'm gonna make an outlandish decision to mix them both up, and that makes the healer archetype. So what is this healer archetype in metaphorrefantazio? Well, in the context of the game, this is supposed to be the dedicated healer of the party. The archetype's job is to heal, revive, cleanse debuffs and ailments to keep your team up and running. The healer is also the source of light magic element damage. With healer's high magic stat, healer can be doubled as a light element damage dealer, while also heals quite a lot of HP for the team. But I think this is where the good stops. While healer is a solid archetype dedicated for healing and some magic damage dealing, their capability stops there, because a quick look at the healer's affinities, oh, these are pretty crippling. Dark weakness makes sense, since, I mean, this healer is a holy theme archetype, but weak to strike physical as well? And you know that most of the enemy's physical attacks are strike attacks as well. It's also pretty dominant in the first cathedral dungeon, where zombies do punch you with strike affinities. This makes healer quite a fragile archetype until you have a way to either cover that weakness up or have access to buffs and debuffs, affecting your overall defensive capabilities. So while the healer can keep your team alive and healthy, that healer's weakness is when they get gunned down in a single turn, which can easily happen with the strike weakness. This is kinda why I hope this iteration of a healer is more so of a cleric, wearing heavy armor with good defense, while having the capability of healing and physical attacks with some holy damage. Oh yeah, healer's strength is not good as well. In fact, it is the worst stat the healer had. I guess this makes healer more so of a priest class rather than a cleric. Okay. As I'm writing for this video, I realize it's actually so hard to inherit anything to healer with such a strict theming of a healer, because well, healer is already a very niche archetype by design. So for healer, I am allowing some leeway around the theming. What I mean by this is that we can build towards a cleric kind of class instead of committing to the pure priest class build, meaning that even if healer's strength is bad, I will allow some physical skills, because it still has some niche of exploiting weaknesses, for example. It's not entirely useless, even with low strength. So, what should we inherit to healer to improve its capabilities in battle, while composing its healer's theming? I don't think magic skills are necessary to inherit, because healer already has the best iteration of light magic attacks at their respective levels, so I won't include more magic skills. I don't know if the choices that I included in this will be lame or not, but it mostly consists of expanding the healer's healing capabilities. For the first skill to be inherited, it is Day from Seeker. Because healer only has multi-target healing skills, Day is useful for when you only need to heal one character and for MP conservation, because Medi is significantly more expensive than Day. For the next skill, if you have access to Magic Knight already, Medillion from Magic Knight is a great healing skill as a substitute for Medi. Medillion has the same MP cost with an additional restriction of healing characters on the same row only, but the healing amount is a lot more than Medi. Essentially, it's a better healing if you can play around the formation restriction. Another skill from the Knight lineage, First Aid from Knight is a handy healing tool as well. It's a healing skill that cannot be cast in battle, but is useful as a healing tool when outside of combat because it costs only 2 MP. It's better to use First Aid to recover health while out of combat than using like Day for example, purely because of the low MP costs for MP conservation. Other than healing skills, I want to push for the Cleric playstyle, where the healer has capabilities on physical based attacks, even though healer don't really have the best strength. These choices of physical attack skills are Perfect Punch and Skullcracker from Brawler, and Shield Arts from Knight. These are all strike affinity physical skills with different additional effects. My personal favorite of these three is Shield Arts. However, for healer, Perfect Punch seems like they have the perfect synergy with healer because its damage relies on having a higher amount of HP. So healer can restore their HP reliably to cast Perfect Punch because the skill costs HP to deal the optimal amount of damage the healer can do with a physical attack. Just like other archetypes, healer can cooperate with other archetypes to do synthesis skills, which are higher level skills or new skills for the cost of more MP and turn icons. Healer's pool of synthesis skills are quite simple: Mahama, Medica, and Magical Injection. Let's start with the first two. Mahama is pretty much self-explanatory. It's a multi-target version of Hama and is probably the one synthesis skill that you'll use very often. It's definitely useful for encounters with a lot of enemies that are weak to light. Needless to say, this is an amazing skill to have ready. To get Mahama, pair your healer with either a Seeker, a Mage, or another healer. Medica is straight up the better version of Medi. It heals more HP. That being said, I don't think you'll ever need to cast this as a synthesis skill because you'll be healing more than the HP cap on the early game with it. Medi is already a strong healing for the early game, and because there is no overhealing gimmick above the HP cap in this game, healing a lot more than your HP cap is not worth it and is a waste of your resource. Although, I can see the situation when you want to use this, if all your party members were left with single digit HP, which, yeah, that's the only situation to use it. So for a failsafe, Medica can be obtained with pairing your healer with either a Knight, another healer, or a Commander. And make sure your healer already learns Medi first to gain access to Medica synthesis skill. And for the last synthesis skill, it's Magical Injection. I'm gonna level with you here. I've never even cast this synthesis skill at all. It looks good though, notifying an attack that inflicts ailments for all allies. That seems good. Let's see how it actually does. Okay, it is a little bit misleading here, because what this does is nullifying the ailments and not the attack. If you've played Grand Blue Fantasy before, this is similar to the term of fail in Grand Blue Fantasy. So honestly, this isn't really a good synthesis skill unless you know the enemy had some ailments up their sleeves. One such example would be against those mimics that could inflict sleep or charm on your party members. which can be crippling to fight against. This is where magical injections shines, and it is just as niche as most of the other synthesis skills like this. So to get magical injection, pair your healer with either a brawler, a merchant, or a summoner. To get all of the synthesis skills listed, a quick setup will be to run 2 healers and a brawler. But running 2 healers seems wrong, so for another case, the setup would be 1 seeker or a mage, 1 knight, 1 brawler, and 1 healer. Brawler in this equation is important not just for magical injection, but for brawler's synthesis skill, with healer being a powerful physical light damage skill. And so now, we have healer's Adept archetype. After all I've said about differentiating a priest versus a cleric class, healer's Adept archetype is named Cleric, which apparently isn't a change in playstyle to the whole cleric class, like the depiction of cleric in other media. It's basically an upgraded version of healer with some new healing capabilities. Cleric has Hamaon and Medica, which are directly upgrades to the 2 main skills that healer will have and use often, with Godly Blessing amping up Medica's healing. Cleric also has an HP regen mechanic with Ridine that doesn't heal instantly, but heals periodically per turn, which is useful as a preparation type of skill when you know someone will get hit. It definitely has its own niche. However, the main takeaway for Cleric archetype is the access to revival skills, which is a must-have skill because dying will happen from time to time, and this is the solution to that problem. So Cleric looks great, a solid healing archetype with a plethora of great healing capabilities. If we're looking at it this way, it's a completely fine archetype to play as, because we got healer for their healing capabilities. But when we compare Cleric to say like healer, you'll notice that Cleric loses some capabilities like clearing ailments or debuffs. So for the section of inheriting skills to Cleric, we're going to cover these types of things. So the first 2 skills that I suggest to inherit are both Patra and Dekunda from healer. Patra clears ailments and Dekunda clears debuffs. Having a lot of healing is good, but there's a point where your party gets crippled just because of ailments and debuffs, so these 2 skills would prevent that from happening. For the next skill, similarly to healer as a basic archetype, Cleric does not have a single target healing skill that is used to preserve MP and to only heal 1 party member when needed. Deyama from Magic Seeker is the upgraded version of Dey and is the skill that I would suggest inheriting to Cleric. However, Dey from Seeker is fine if you haven't unlocked Deyama yet. The cons would be that Dey heals less, but with the help of Godly Blessing, Dey would heal enough HP most of the time. Bringing back the Cleric playstyle just like for healer, Crushing Fist from Pugilist is a great strike affinity attack skill to cover for the lack of physical damage, but more so to fit the theme of Cleric. Crushing Fist is the upgraded version of Perfect Punch. It deals more damage the higher your HP is, and it costs HP, which is easily alleviated by the healing capabilities that you have. And then for the last few skills, these are kind of a stretch, but hear me out just a little bit. A healer's job is mostly to keep your party alive by virtue of healing. However, sometimes one of your party members might just get gunned down in 1 turn, and you can't really do anything to alleviate that. So my solution here would be to slap in defense buffs for the entire party. Maraku Kaja from Commander is one of those skills, but I want to mainly focus on Shelter Formation from General because of how good this skill is to keep your party alive and running. 2 stacks of defense buffs and moving your formation to the back row really helps for the survivability in the cost of your overall physical damage. But that doesn't really matter because you can easily change formation in your turn. This can synergize well with Madeline from Magic Knight to have a healing that rivals the amount that Medica gives, but with lesser MP costs. These skills might make your healer look more like a knight, but honestly, they do function a little bit similar, so I embrace it. We're not done though, because one other skill that can be inherited for healer to alleviate one of its weakness, in this case its literal weakness, is Dark Dodge from Magic Knight. Healer had a dark weakness, and this can be super fatal if the enemy have some dark element damage that can kill the healer quickly. It's not a complete cover to dark, so you'd still leave it to chance whether or not you will dodge the dark element damage that targets you, but more dodge rates is still a plus, so I'll say this is worth a slot. Cleric synthesis skills have the same pattern as healer's synthesis skills. Heck, Cleric even has one synthesis skill that is a direct transfer from healer, magical injection. For this synthesis skill, it's pretty much the same as before. It only nullifies ailments one time. It has its niche, worth it for those niches only. It even has the same party combination as before. Get it with a brawler, a merchant, or a summoner in your party. What else do we have here? Oh, it's Mahamaon and Medical, a multi-target version of Hamaon and an upgraded version of Medica. It's the same pattern as before. Just like before, Mahamaon is a great skill for encounters with multiple enemies that are weak to light, so to clear the battle quickly. It's as simple as that. So to get Mahamaon, pair your cleric with either a seeker, a mage, or another healer. However, for Medical, I personally think this is unnecessary because you'll definitely at the point that you heal too much. Medica is already a big healing and will mostly fill up your HP to full, especially with Godly Blessing. Having the upgraded version of it that costs a lot more MP, double the turn icon cost, and have no overhealing mechanic is downright unnecessarily costly for the same return. But I guess I'll understand if you want to use this for the same singular case scenario as before, when your whole party was left with 1-digit health. But otherwise, I don't think it's worth it to cast this. So I'm gonna skip to the last synthesis skill for Cleric. Godly Blessing, not to be confused with Godly Blessing, the same name for the passive skill, is a skill to revive all down allies with full HP. Now, there's some contradiction here that I want to emphasize. This is an amazing skill with great potential. Reviving all allies and returning to battle with a single press of a button, turning the tides of the battle instantly, is a very powerful skill to have. But also, this is a synthesis skill. This means that as a synthesis skill that requires 2 party members with a certain combination to cast, the maximum of Godly Blessings revival is on 2 other party members, which is still nice, but it kinda wastes its potential with how synthesis skill works. You also basically have to gamble that your cleric and the party member combination aren't the ones who died to be able to cast this. And furthermore, this does not heal other party members that did not die. Only those who died are being healed to full. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good skill, and is MP efficient, being 36 MP total instead of 40 MP total from casting Samarekarm 2 times. I don't know, I just find this a weird skill. Personally, I would like to use this skill if it also heals those who didn't die in battle. So it's basically a huge reset button. That way it was more worth it to cast. It's a good skill though, so pairing your cleric with either a mage, a mass dancer, or a summoner makes this skill ready to use. To get all these synthesis skills in one go, excluding medical, because of the reason that I've mentioned before, pairing your cleric with a mage and a brawler is enough to get those synthesis skills. If you insist on getting medical, slap in one knight for the last party member. And at last, we've arrived to Healer's elite archetype, Saviour.
I have come.
There's not really much to talk about when we are talking about archetypes of the same lineage. Most of the skills that they receive just got upgraded, like Medica to Medical and Hamaon to Hamadine. However, one particular notable upgrade is that Saviour got an additional upgrade to Hamadine, Exorcist Light, which is possibly one of, if not the best single target magic damage skill in the whole game. Paired with an archetype that has high magic stat, this is a very strong archetype to use. For its healing capabilities, other than the upgrade to Medical, Saviour gets the long-awaited upgrade to Patra, Pen Patra. This is a multi-target status ailment cleanse, which is a very much welcome addition to Healer's Kit. Other than that, we also have Patricarm, which prevents one party member from dying when taking fatal damage one time, which is also awesome if you know someone is gonna die regardless of you healing them. Yeah, the very infamous meme of SMT games has always been that enemies can and will instantly kill you and throw you back to the main menu, and it's no exception for metaphorrefantazio. With Patricarm, even if it's kinda underwhelming with it only targeting one ally and that it only applies one time, it can be a game changer as long as someone is still alive. All around, still a solid archetype gearing to keep your party alive, but a lot more offensive with its damage. However, just like before, if you haven't noticed already, Saviour loses some healing capabilities just like what happened with Cleric. But this time, Saviour loses Samaricarm, which is probably one of the most crucial healing skills that a healer can have. You can't heal someone who already died, so it's a failsafe to prevent the entire battle to end abruptly. So this is an instant segue to what skills should we inherit to Saviour. And the first one is Samaricarm from Cleric, to prepare whenever one of your party members dies in an unexpected way. Honestly, this should be packaged into Saviour, but I get that they want to include another similar mechanic with Patricarm. Not much else to say other than this is an essential skill to have. The next skill on my list will be Deyamahan from Soul Hacker for when you only need to heal one person. The reasoning is pretty much the same as before as well with Dey and Deyama. It preserves your MP by only healing one ally when you only need to heal an ally, so that MP doesn't go to waste. Now, other than an expansion of healing capabilities, I'm gonna promote a lot of defensive skills that were provided by one other elite archetype. At first, this section was supposed to be just shelter formation from general, but since I already mentioned that before, I thought I should change it up to let other skills into the spotlight. This one elite archetype that I'm talking about is Paladin, a Knight Lineage elite archetype. The skill that I chose from Paladin are Protect Guard, Holy Knight's Works, and Emergency Aid. So let's start with the healing skills first. Holy Knight's Works is an amazing skill that includes Dekunda in the skill. There's definitely some battles where the enemy will spam debuffs to at least one of your party member, making them essentially not in the battle. While the skill Dekunda is a viable pick as well, Holy Knight's Works also heals the debuffed ally, so they can instantly get back in the fight. Of course, it's a quote-unquote worse skill than Dekunda in the debuff clearing aspect because it is not for all allies but only for one. But considering that this game has a lot of damaging abilities that also debuffs, some enemies might have those skills too. So casting Holy Knight's Works is a lot more effective on this situation than Dekunda. The other healing skill is Emergency Aid, which is a healing skill castable only when out of combat. It's first aid but multi-target. It's cheap yet heals a lot of HP for the entire team, so it's worth it for a long dungeon run especially, but handy in general. Going back to the last skill from Paladin, Protect Guard is a Knight coded skill. However, this is one of those skills that I thought would fit the Cleric class fantasy quite well, being the holy base healer type of character with some capabilities on physical offense and defense. You know, when you think about it, Paladin is the Cleric class. Maybe this is how they make that kind of class in metaphorrefantazio, but nevertheless, we're into deep now, so I'll still include Protect Guard as an option for Saviour, because nullifying a physical attack on one ally is still a great skill to have for defense, especially when a lot of enemies did physical attacks. For the rest of the skills, these are all physical damage skills for the purpose of making the Cleric class with Saviour. These skills are Spiral Fist from Martial Artist, Frenzy from Berserker, Powerful Pulverizer or Radiant Crusher from Destroyer. Out of these skills, I am particularly fond of either Spiral Fist or Radiant Crusher. Recently, I am very fond of Spiral Fist because this also removes buffs from an enemy. A lot of late game bosses do buff themselves, so Spiral Fist is a welcome addition to your arsenal. For Radiant Crusher, it's a light damage skill, which fits a lot with the healer theming, dealing damage with light attacks, yet this ignores resistance. So if something blocks light, you'd still be able to attack them using Radiant Crusher. It is a physical damage skill though, so if it's against an enemy who's either weak or neutral to light, Exorcist Light is still better because of the high magic stat. And now is the last stretch of the Saviour archetype, the synthesis skills. Saviour's synthesis skills are pretty much the same as previously, but with one skill stealing the show out of the 4. But let's talk about the other 3 first. Mahamadine, multi-target version of Hamadine, great for multi-target encounters weak to light. Pair your Saviour with a Seeker, Mage or a Healer. Magic Injection, exactly the same iteration as the other magical injections. Great against enemies that you know will inflict ailments that will cripple your performance otherwise. Pair your Saviour with a Brawler, Merchant or a Summoner. Godly Blessing, a 2-man revive at best to full health, yet does not heal others that didn't die. A very niche situation when 2 of your party members are dead and the other party member that's alive is the required combination. Pair your Saviour with a Mage, Mass Dancer or a Summoner. And finally, the last synthesis skill, and is a game changer for Saviour, Divine Punishment. This is a very huge nuke ability, similar damage to Exorcist Light, yet targets all enemies, and it implants weakness to light for those enemies hit. If you watched my previous video on Mage, you'd know how much I praise Lost Wall for implanting weakness to literally all elemental affinity. Divine Punishment only implants one type of elemental affinity, but it opens up to a lot of combo opportunities by exploiting weaknesses. I don't know if light is one of those elements that enemies usually block, but nevertheless, it is such an amazing synthesis skill to have ready, purely for the damage scaling, but is elevated with its weakness implant. To get Divine Punishment, pair your Saviour with either a Gunner, a Mass Dancer, or a Berserker. To get all of these synthesis skills, the requirements are pretty varied. So go whatever combination you'd like, but usually it can go with 1 Mage, 1 Mass Dancer, 1 Brawler, and 1 Saviour. And that's about it. This is my iteration of the Healer archetype from metaphorrefantazio. If you have a different build idea and don't mind sharing them, comment down below your thoughts on the Healer archetype. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again soon.